it's right now just the two of us, and I'm sure, hopefully, we'll have other people joining us. But today, we're talking about something super important, and in terms of Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine, which we're calling it more of like a whole person type medicine or indigenous medicine. Um, that's the name that I've done it because I haven't quite figured out the right way to say it. And you've come up with the whole person, WHOL, opposed to holistic. And this is why I'm having trouble with a new word, because holistic, which is a beautiful practice, but it doesn't come from the same thought process. Yeah, I'm hearing feedback from myself.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Am I okay? Let's take these away. Whatever they're doing, they're not helping.
Yeah.
Good. No.
Sometimes the plug-in types are better.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
So holistic, and we'll discuss what holistic is, and then of course there is conventional medicine, or allopathic medicine. They used to call the holistic medicines alternative, but alternative to what? Because it was the original. Well, at least the indigenous piece where we're coming from was the original medicine. So, so that's the topic that we're going to be discussing today. Clarissa, would you like to introduce yourself and our mission here?
Indeed. Thank you. Well, I'm Clarissa, and I am a Chinese medicine practitioner. I specialize in Qigong and Chinese nutrition therapy. I'm focused on women going through menopause and into the next stage of their life. And Chitra is my partner in crime here. You introduce yourself. You're an Ayurvedic doctor. You have the Substack Art of Menopausing, and I have the Substack Heart of Menopause, which is why we're Art and Heart of Menopause in our live series. And I think both of us are very committed in helping women to see that there is more than just the allopathic approach to menopause, and the benefits that bringing Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine approaches and principles into this stage of life. What can that bring them? We think it can bring them a lot, but we're really here to open up, to educate, and to share our knowledge freely in this space.
Yeah. And it's been wonderful. How long has it been? This is our number 5?
Number 5, yeah.
5 years, 5 weeks old. So just this morning, I received an email from another Substack that I subscribe to, and an invitation was to join in on midlife work. And it was supposed to be for a group of midlife women, and they were, I don't want to give away who it was, because I don't want it to feel criticism, but it's basically exactly what we're talking about. So it's a group of midlife women, and they're gathering in a format to talk about midlife issues, basically. And there were 3 bullet points. And the one that got to me this morning, literally just before this live, was, and we will be discussing life with hormone replacement. Rather, as if that is the only thing that really is at issue with menopause and midlife. It's that hormone replacement which is the allopathic conventional medical system thought process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's narrowing down everything pretty much to being about the body. And one of the things is that we've known is, as you said, indigenous, but all cultures at some stage in their history, some of it forgotten, some of it still very much alive, has always seen healing and health as being about mind, body, and spirit, about being in balance with nature. So the inner part of us is in balance with the outer realm. And that if we have a sense of disharmony, it comes up as a disease, it's the whole system that is affected, not just your body parts or your hormones. It's all of you that's impacted by this.
And I would like to take it one step further. We are not, even if we're looking at body, mind, spirit, emotion, thought processes, we are not singular individuals. We are cells within a larger system. We are connected to all, so it's also the environment that needs to be looked at. It's also our relationship. It is everything. It is the whole of being, rather than the allopathic or the conventional wisdom, where they're looking at it from a couple of places. I'm going to say beyond the body as well, because there are a lot of therapists, there are the coaches who are looking at it from a psychological perspective or an emotional perspective. And those people are out there, as and so I don't want to just limit them to hormone as well.
No.
It's really not be generous.
But I think what we forget in this space, as you said, it's the environment, it's the culture in which we live. It's the history of our history and the history that's gone before us in generations before us. It's what we've been through in our own lives to this point that is going to give a determination of the kind of experiences we're going to, some of the root causes of why we feel at a time of big change for us. Well, that's without doubt. But where is the real disharmony, disease coming from? Can we get to the root of it? Not just one or two parts of it. So yes, there are emotions and mind. Really looking across the whole spectrum to see how the person can, and in more than anything, how much they can self-heal through this process. And I think that's a huge central point of Chinese medicine, that the ability that we initiate self-healing so the person doesn't feel powerless and helpless in the process, but actually very engaged in their journey to greater wellness.
Yes, and they're also validated. Not only are they empowered to make changes, but they're also validated in those subtle feelings when they know something is wrong. So within Ayurveda, we have 6 stages of disease. And we're not talking about menopause, that it is a disease. So we're just talking about it all. And for 3 of those stages, medical science does not even acknowledge that something is occurring. Only at the 4th stage are people are they go, oh, we can find a symptom. We can find something happened in the blood work. Right. And so that's when they start noticing, oh, there's an issue in the blood work. And even that is a temporary thing. They don't fully acknowledge until there is, that's when they'll start looking for more prevalent, whether it is a malfunction organ or a tissue gone wrong. So that's when they'll start looking further. But we're looking at 3 stages that are not even acknowledged, even that first stage. That's when they're like, okay, so we tested this. Let's wait and see. Right?
Yeah.
So that a lot with hormonal.
Yeah. And I think and it's not to say that allopathic medicine hasn't done wonderful things, life-saving techniques, technology is not here, but a lot of their approach for a lot of life stage and chronic life style illnesses is very analytical. And so you're right. They go measure, see something, treat something. And we're much more looking at, it's certainly in Chinese medicine, we're looking at things that can arise because of season and whether we're, out of sync with the season, life season, time of the year. We're looking for imbalances in them, which will obviously then begin to show up in subtle and then more prominent ways. But we also look at constitution, which is who you kind of are health-wise on all levels. And every one of us has a constitution. And all of those factors work together in medicine. So if someone came, obviously imbalances were really showing, you'd work there first. But you have to acknowledge and address the other factors because they're all working together as the person is a whole person. So we aren't just treating imbalances. Although, a lot of time we're waiting till the imbalances show before we seek help. Whereas traditionally, Chinese medicine practitioners were paid to keep their person well. If they got ill, they might lose income, but their whole premise was to work with people to maintain a level of health. So we're always working to correct natural imbalances which occur all the time. I mean, yin and yang are not a fixed opposition, or they're in constant flow with each other. And that's where what the practitioner's role was. And that often came through diet and exercise and rest and maybe herbals. And acupuncture, which has come a lot later, is a much corrective form of intervention relative to some of the other practices.
So, because we're looking at how Chinese medicine and Ayurveda both are compatible, and similar systems, and then there's slight variation. So would you say, because Ayurveda has the same premise, we're looking at imbalance, but that first step, imbalance, we're also looking to see if the body can naturally, on its own, without intervention, is it returning back to its own balance? Is that true for Chinese medicine?
Not always. I think it can be a little bit more intentional at times. We are certainly more likely to look at trying to correct an imbalance. And we'll intervene. Maybe that is only a gentle say, not always, because dietary isn't always gentle. We've got to be clear that those things can be quite strong, but you might start with seeing what the diet's like, making a small shift there, or rather than just saying, will it correct itself? Because no, we tend to intervene quite gently.
I see. Okay. Yeah. So in a sense, and I think that partly comes from the difference between the yin and yang for you, and we're looking at 3 doshas. So we're always noting the imbalance, the initial balance. So it happens more in a cyclical manner rather than one is too heavy and the other is too light.
Yeah.
What Chinese medicine is more of a seesaw kind of situation in the early stages, whereas in Ayurveda, it's more of a cyclic thing. And in Ayurveda, it's always Kapha comes first, Pitta comes second, Vata comes third. And for anyone who isn't aware of that, yin and yang is pretty much the lexicon, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are not. And those are constitutional, as we spoke about earlier, and they're constitutional ratios. And each one has its own qualities. So we're always looking at this dance that these various constitution bioenergetic archetypes could call them. It's always a dance between the three. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the difference. Whereas we are looking at deficiencies and excesses, and then the relationships between those across the different systems of the body. And we are always looking to ensure that chi and blood that chi can flow, that blood can flow, and that we're not impeding. Because the minute those things become impeded, that's when things start to show up for people.
Yeah.
So there's a different kind of basis, I think, to how we approach initial showing up with people saying they don't feel quite like themselves. And it doesn't mean that we're saying that the person is showing really visible symptoms at all. They can be quite nothingness, really, but we're always working to correct that imbalance, which is there in nature as much as it is inside.
Yeah. So it feels like to me that Ayurveda starts at a slightly earlier stage, and it has more moving parts. Because yes, we're looking at blood, and we're looking at prana, and we're looking at fire. We're looking at various systems and tissue and channels, but we're starting at an earlier stage because when you're looking at three things, the first stable form is a triangle, right? You can sit on a stool with three legs. You can't on two. So maybe we're starting a little bit earlier to see what's going on there. So, first of all, I want to welcome Amy and Vedic Soul. Thank you for joining us. We were talking about the allopathic convention. So let's look at how they're very reductionist. They're very scientific. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that there is just one pathway to validating things. There's certain rules and regulations. We humans have many, many more things that we can validate, whether it is discomfort. Well, start discomfort. Discomfort is subjective. Everyone has a different way about it. But it's the beginning of lack of ease. And then it can go further into disease. Let's talk about the
holistic.
Yeah, the holistic movement versus where we're coming from, whole body indigenous. What do you think?
What do I think? I think that holistic, obviously in its Greek original word, means whole. But I think now it's become quite lifestyle. So when I meet holistic practitioners, they're working with the lifestyle part and maybe some mind part, but the soul is gone, and there's not that soul spirit component to the holistic medicine that is most prominent here now in the West. And the holistic medicine is almost like it's kind of a halfway house between the whole body approach, where we see ourselves and deeply connected to nature and to the cycles of life. And it's not as analytical as, and shall we say, male orientated as the allopathic, because it's quite a direct, for me, it's a very direct analytical, straight through kind of practice. It sits somewhere in the middle. There's still a lot, I think, at times reliance on tests and the use of things like supplements. For me, it's kind of like a step in our direction, but there's a big difference between whole body and the importance of soul, where modern holistic medicine is today.
Yes, I I agree with you, and in a sense, there's also within the holistic, there's the integrated medicine person, as well as the the other one that's doing whole like it. The word holistic has been co-opted by the industry, you know. And so if you just say, okay, one of your just look at your diet, that means to them that it's holistic. Or if you do a little mindfulness or meditation with it, that's holistic. Or slow down to reduce stress or sleep. Um, yeah, those are all, and I think it comes from the reductionist perspective that science, they're recognized that the field is a little bit larger, but again, it has to be measured.
Yes.
So how much a day, or specific um specific herbs and specific exercises, specific, only those that can be measured are agreed upon. And so that middle space, very much of a spec between it's a bigger spec. And
Yes.
the more people realize that the medical system is them, the medical system works for great for certain things, but for many things it's failing. That they're moving over looking for new things, and rather than looking at the perspective of how we're looking at life as a whole, they're just going to go for specific. So, when you're talking diet, you're looking at proteins and carbs and calories, and that's not a whole thing. And I have to say this about turmeric, because turmeric has been a big, huge it's star that came from data. It's everyone's talking to her. Now they've got a few others. But turmeric, they've decided, and this is true across the board from not only a holistic perspective, but from the Ayurvedic perspective, that they've indicated one specific molecule within within turmeric, curcumin, and that's what they've studied. That's what they're also trying to patent, rather than it be, and that brings in a whole other issue around allopathic methodology. And so they've said curcumin is what does the anti-inflammatory property of turmeric. The problem when you start pulling single organisms out of a plant or a food, or you're going to, uh, we don't know yet all the things that go into a plant or food. We don't know all of the mechanisms within the body. They're discovering new things every single day, that they just don't know. So when we start doing the one thing, when we start saying, okay, you need iron because your iron is low in the body, they're not looking at the function of the liver. They're not looking at whether or not the foods are being digested. They're not looking at whether a person is overworking themselves, depleting themselves in many ways. And this is where we come to the Ayurvedic and the Chinese medicine.
And you're so right. I see a lot of single herbs, and I think I might have said this in earlier conversations as well, being co-opted into Western medicine. I've seen some quite reputable nutritionists in the West and say, oh, so take Zhonghui, take He Shigu. Well, that isn't even how Chinese herbalism works. I mean, herbs have emotional components. They have their functional components. They are very rare prescribed singularly. They are put together in formulas that work and balance and counterbalance, and they take into consideration the person's constitution as well as what might be imbalances so that they're right for you. And so here they are being promoted longevity or hot flushes, but without really understanding how they work. And also that they could be, well, some of those herbs can actually cause liver damage if they're given to someone who's sensitive. And then what happens is, well, that's dangerous. Chinese medicine, herbal medicine is dangerous, but it's not because we're trying to take bits of what is probably the most complex materia medica in the world. That's how herbs are classified in the materia medica, and trying to apply a kind of allopathic mindset to them. And it just isn't how that works.
Yeah. So in Ayurveda, we will do a single, but most of the traditional herbs are remedies that it could be 20 different herbs within it, because there are many systems that are being affected. Every time you touch one system, it's going to affect everything else. Everything is fully integrated. And then we also take into account how that medicine is prepared and what kind of vehicle it goes in. So most of Western medicine, the holistic, or they're talking about, now it's like put it into a gut, first of all, which is a whole other thing that clogs the system, as well as additional sugar that are not natural to the sugar world, the sweet world. So let's put it in Ayurveda. But the vehicle itself, it tells us how it's going to go in, how it's not going to. And the other thing that is coming from that allopathic through holistic perspective is that herbs and nutrients are taken for life. Just like any other kind of medicine, any other kind of pharmaceutical is taken for life, where we're looking at it from the perspective of, we want to raise the intelligence of the body so that it no longer needs supplementation. And again, a caveat to that is if the person is relatively healthy. But still, we'd be looking at changing the herbs that are being used on a regular basis. And it's not every single day. We don't want the body to be on it.
No, it's exactly the same. And they're seen as relatively, I mean, they can take a time to work. That depends on the person. But they're not seen as to be taken usually for life. They're seen as being taken for a period of time to make an energetic shift in the person's being, inner self, so to say. And that we're also, along that, helping them to understand certain principles, because you'd rather really give a herb and then not make some dietary change or movement change or other aspects, so that here she comes, the Ayurvedic cat. Hello, boss. It's just joining in. It's conversations about Ayurveda. Sure, it's cat. But that is how it flows. That we are making a shift, and when that shift has been achieved, that particular medication, that particular herbal formulation may be removed. And it's the same that's true with acupuncture. I'm not an acupuncturist, but I've studied and worked alongside them. And, they'll give you a number of treatments to see a shift. When that shift is achieved, don't keep going forever for the same treatment. You might go for maintenance to keep your energy levels balanced, but that's completely different. And they're not attempting to keep you for life. They'd love to see you say, I'm well, and go on until another thing happens somewhere down the line. But they've helped you move into a self-healing mode. So, it's just coming from a different perspective than putting you on a medication and essentially leaving you on that medication forever, essentially. It's very rare to see people come off medication, rather than to have more added into in the Western approach.
Because there are, right? Because all of a sudden, the lack of intelligence, the lack of the body, or it's not even the lack of intelligence, it's just losing the intelligence. It's like we shifted from using our minds for math and the calculators. All of a sudden, we forgot how to do the math. Same is true, in most systems of the body. If you stop exercising, you stop the muscle of exercising, then eventually all you've got left is some sort of memory.
Yeah.
How to do that. So let's talk about now. Well, we are talking about whole body.
Yeah. Before we do that, shall we ask our people who've joined us whether they have any questions and comments? We'd love, anything that's popped up for you while we've been talking.
Yeah, we get so passionate about this that we can just go on forever.
Maybe not. Amy and Vedic Soul, any questions, any comments? We'd love to hear them.
So perhaps they're doing the dishes, or they are
maybe they're just listening, but
yes, which is beautiful. We appreciate you either way. So if we go to the whole body perspective, what are we looking at here from the whole body perspective?
Well, interesting. I think a big part of it is, for me, and I'm really interested in how you work, and I would say we all work a little differently. There's not like the same sort of rules and principles always, but some basics is that we are really working to understand that person in front of us in a lot of detail when that person comes to us. And for me, that is not just about what's going on with how they're living their life, but also, why are you here? As one of my first questions, you come here, why did you come here? And if the person, because that's going to come to their healing journey. If you've been pushed here by your husband, your friend, what's your commitment to the process? Even at that stage, that's where I begin. Before we start looking about any kind of looking at the person as a whole person, listening to the person. The way the voice is telling us a lot about people's health. And I'll tell a little story here that my traditional Qigong teacher came to a practitioner many, many years ago, and he'd been in the army and he'd been a rugby player. And he walked in, the guy said, "You've got a problem there on that hip." And guess, how did you know? He said, "I heard you coming in." So we're not just what comes out of someone's mouth. We're listening to the whole person. We look into their eyes to see the Shen, the spirit of the person. And we can understand that if they're a bit vacant or it comes and goes, the vitality, the sparkle, that person might have more difficulty taking on board your message. We might have to work differently to convey it. And then we really dig into that person. But come in.
Yes, right there, because I know that you've got so much more to go, but
let's stop there.
Yeah, let's stop there for just second, because Ayurveda does the same thing. We have various, some of us are taught to take note of the time when the individual has contacted or who referred that individual to us. So, we're looking at the really esoteric basis of, okay, so what is the esoteric, uh it's kind of like people who say, "Oh, look, a feather. Mother gave me the feather," and my mother's gone, right? This was a sign from others. So we're looking at those kinds of really esoteric signs. And then, yes, we're looking at why someone has them, what is it for them? Because if I just start with what is them, or what is let's go do a test right now, then the person isn't heard, and I think that's probably the most important piece of the whole process. The beginning of working with an Ayurvedic practitioner is that they get to sit and they get to be heard. And that little piece alone brings about a whole new set of circumstances for healing. And one, they're heard, you know, so that they can let down their guard just a little bit because they're safe. Right?
Yeah.
And that's letting down of the guard alone is a shift in energy that can help, that starts the healing process. Whereas in a doctor's office, you go in and you fill out a form, you're told to sit, wait. And what happens? The stress levels go, you know?
And 7 minutes is a typical time to meet someone you've never met before that you may never meet again.
Yeah.
And you're going to you haven't got time to tell them about anything. Even if you came prepared, you've got the most top line. They don't know you. They're going to make a quick diagnosis and move you on, because that's how a system, sadly, and I know lots of clinicians in the outside world hate this, but this is the system that they've been now locked into. And depending on how capable the patient is, it can be actually quite traumatized. My ex-partner was bipolar 1. Believe you me, going to see a different psychiatrist every 3 months to that person, having to tell them is the worst experience.
Right.
Because you're having to tell quite deep stuff about yourself to someone who hasn't really got the time and isn't interested in you and won't see you next time you come. And I think that's why so many do come to Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine practitioners, to be heard as a whole person.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, even in the holistic world, even though they're not necessarily spending 7 minutes with them, because we're already talking out of pocket, um, out of pocket is the best way to put it. But still, that initial reading is rushed. Whereas when people come to me, I'm usually talking to them for an hour, free of charge, just to see, do we connect? Is this a thing? It's not. Can I help you? Can I refer you to someone else? And the coaching world does this, but this is something that we've been doing for a long time. And then only if the fit, then they get initial an initial session, and that initial session is an hour and a half long. And in that hour and a half, what's happened prior to that, they get a to fill out. It's extensive, and it discusses all sorts of things. And then in that hour and a half, we review that. I get to ask questions. And what's really interesting, what's really, really interesting about that is that most people are so trained into just telling the facts of what they think is happening that they forget the rest of the thing. They forget to say that, when I was 6 years old, and they're in menopause, I was 6 years old, I had a major dose of antibiotic, right?
Yes.
Or I really never liked to eat whatever it is. And each one of those little tiny things of life, or the fact that they're eating lunch in the car while they're driving, or the fact that it takes them a while to that I don't say, "Oh, you're doing it." I'm never going to say that because lifestyle means and trust, and just like we said the other day with massage, where you don't want to go into heat, the same is true every other aspect. So you're not going to change your diet overnight. You're not going to change your exercise. It's going to be slow and easy and gentle. What this does is it creates a relationship. And that's part of as you said, people were paid or to keep people healthy. So that means a lifelong relationship, basically, with your practitioner.
Exactly. And so we are wanting to know, we might ask very things that don't even seem related to their complaint. Like, do you like your work? What's going on in your work? What makes you frustrated? What emotions do you have difficulty expressing? Or which emotions do you feel you express the most? Colors and flavors they like, foods that repel them or attract them. We're trying to understand, because I'm trying also to get at their underlying constitution, and a lot of those things come from there. The imbalances can be quite easily looked at because you can do facial, tongue, pulse diagnosis, quickly pick up an imbalance. That's the same techniques that an acupuncturist or a herbalist use, because we have the same training. And you do that in Ayurveda too. So you can look at the imbalance, but the underlying person, we have to ask all sorts of questions. You ask them about their family, what sadnesses are happening in their family, stress levels, how they cope with stress, what time of day they like best, what season they like best, and what they don't like. So you're building up this deeper understanding on things that don't seem relevant, but now we understand. Here in front of me is a person with maybe in menopause with a kidney yin deficiency, but they're a wood person. So I need to think about also things like they're not very good at detoxifying things out of their brain. They need to stay away from oily foods, cause a lot of, issues that can last them for days. They're not the one who could go out with their friends and eat fried whatever and not suffer for 3 days afterwards. They may be flexible or inflexible in mind as much as in body. So we're building up that layered understanding of that person, as well as obviously they're in the menopause season, which is governed by the water and the flow. And we don't want it to ice up. So we're working with all of these different things till we really, really know the person. As you said, that first extended into, you might only send them away with some very simple and possibly either give them maybe a food diary to keep, because then the next appointment, we can begin a self-discovery journey about looking about or how they went with the movements. So we're step by step helping them to not just expect you to fix them, but they go on that self-discovery and self-healing journey. So self-reflection, and a person who finds it hard to self-reflect, I think it may be a little more difficult for them to get going in this. But
Yeah. And there's even more, which both Ayurveda and medicine when we're looking at what's happening. But they're adjunct, and some of us are trained in them. So Chinese medicine, well known, feng shui, right? It's well known. We have and so we're also looking at the placement of where the kitchen is in the house, or where the bathroom is in the house, and how to, because the kitchen governs the fire element, the bathroom governs the water element. They are, either one of those are being blocked, lost, or over too much. That's going to affect your. I'm trying to get doors right now because there's a blockage. They're old. I have to jiggle them all the time, and to open and close them well. And I'm having problems with actually getting this work done, which is makes a lot of sense to me. But those are some fundamental root things in terms of your house, your home, it's like your body, but it's outside. Yeah. Then there's the astrology of things. So you can look at astrology and how someone speaks. And there's so many different things. So yes, we are building this relationship. I will also, after that first one, give them small things to do that have to do with their daily routine. And there are certain constitutions where I can challenge them to do a lot. And there are certain constitutions where I can only give them one, otherwise they'll get overwhelmed. And there are other constitutions where I really have to crack the whip because they'd rather be sitting on the couch with
Yeah, exactly. And I may reach a point where, as a non-acupuncturist, and I'm not saying acupuncturists always know about Chinese dietary therapy or Qigong, because they don't, but that might be a recommendation that they could meet someone like that too along the journey, because they're really blocked. And of course, acupuncture works fast. That's what it can move. I mean, I don't know if you've experienced it, but sometimes they put this needle in you, oof, moved something really, really quickly. And that might be what a person needs, because they aren't yet in a space to begin to actually enact some of the things I'm wanting them to do. Then that's where the working with an acupuncturist can really support them. So it becomes not only holistic, whole body for us, but it becomes whole medicine where needed.
As you said that, yes, I've experienced acupuncture, but as you said that, it reminded me of the quick fix. And maybe that's one of the reasons why Ayurveda, acupuncture has gotten so popular in the West. It's because it's that quick fix, which takes us back to the conventional medical system, where we want the quick fix in everything. And it doesn't mean that that Ayurveda can't have, but you're not going to necessarily get that big boom hit that has changed that you can.
No. And acupuncture doesn't always work like that. Sometimes it can.
Yeah.
Because they can go very directly to a particular couple of spots, and there can be an energetic shift, which is sufficient maybe to kickstart the healing process. That can still take a long time, but I think the acupuncture can have, and you can feel it sometimes after a session.
And the things with the slower aspects of that, the body can get used to anything rather really quickly. And to demonstrate that, if you put your hand on any part of the body for a while, eventually, at first you feel the hand, you feel the weight, you feel the warmth, you feel the touch.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're running energy, which sometimes you'll continuously feel, but eventually you're not going to feel it anymore because the body has become accustomed to that the way things. And this is the crux of healing, is that our bodies are doing its best to decide what is important to feel and what is not important to feel. And if it's important to feel, then we're going back to those first stages of it balancing itself out. If it's important to feel and it is a danger, then it starts going either in fixing that issue or going into balance state.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very true. So I think it's small steps, and then we work through, but we don't perpetuate with the same approach through the time that the patient works for you. There's a kind of evolving as they respond to the things we're asking them to do, to the treatments we're giving them, and then we might say, well, enough of that. You've made enough change, now. What I think an interesting one is in the holistic, they give a lot of supplements. And one of the things I ask people is, how long have you been taking them? Have you noticed a difference? And there's a kind of, I've been taking them for years. And so what you took them away for 2 or 3 weeks and see the difference might be. And then sometimes their dependence is dependence on taking, because it's been part of a routine. They'll actually probably be often not noticing a huge difference.
Yeah.
And with any food information, I would, give them maybe a short, quite sharp dietary change over, say, a period of 3 to 6 weeks, which isn't exactly instant, but there's a period. If you don't see a shift within that time period, then you might have to change. So it's very much working with the person, seeing where self-healing is coming, getting them to reconnect into their body and listen to it more, which is something we don't do at all in the West, to be honest. Then we spend a lot of time up in our head spaces, unless we are practicing yoga or we've been a meditator. A lot of headspace stuff.
Yeah.
And so learning to come down and listen to ourselves is also a big part of the process.
So we've got about 5 minutes left.
We have.
So one thing I want to tell everyone who is here with us is that we're going to be changing the time that we do this, rather than it's morning for me. It's evening, late.
It's a little bit evening-y for me. So if you're in the European time zone, it'll be early after dinner.
After dinner for the Europeans, and the
Yeah.
US, the American continents, it's going to be midday. We're just going to shift it a little bit. And before we get on, because there is a dream thing that I would love to explore just a little bit about how to go forward so it works for everyone. So what have you got going on right now? Anything specific?
Well, I'm now got my times and dates because I'm doing all this advanced Qigong training. So I'm going to be putting in a workshop on the AccuOils I mentioned in last week's massage, and I'm going to be running a session on the use of acupressure and essential oils for common menopause symptoms, and there'll be a date coming later this week. So I hope people will sign up.
Fantastic. And I have got a Make Ghee with Me session that we do this every new moon, where we get together and we make ghee. Ghee is, I guess, the easiest way to, if you don't know what it is, it's clarified butter, but a little bit more clarified, so it becomes more medicinal. This is particularly wonderful for menopause. It's good for everyone, but menopause women, it really helps shift lot of things in gut and heat issues. And so that's what we do every single week, and we're doing this on Saturday. Yeah, on Saturday, because the new moon just happened yesterday.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we're doing it on Saturday. So that's what we're doing. And shortly I'll be opening up the membership again for fun monsoon season summer season to monsoon or rain season session. So that's a 2-month piece ship that will be open. So
Beautiful.
thank you. So our final, let's dream of the best way, because each of these various ways of managing health have their positive outcome. One positive, so what would you love to see?
I'd love to see more of a recognition from allopathic practitioners of the value of the whole body approach, that we could come a little closer together. At the moment, we're so polarized, and for us to come in more close proximity, because I do think that they have amazing techniques and fantastic life-saving practices. So we don't want to see that we should ever reject so much of what they value, but they could introduce and see more of the whole body approach and see the whole person, that we could actually, some way find a way to work together without them needing to call us alternative or something, but that we are on a continuum of healing for the person.
Yeah. It takes years and years and years to become a conventional practice, medical practice. Years and years. And they specialize in many places, and that has so much benefit when it goes there, when the person needs it, when the body is in a crisis. Yes, absolutely. It also takes many, many years to become a doctor in Chinese medicine or in Ayurveda. Many, many years. And the way we're trained, also, it's not under the pressure cooker that a conventional practitioner is under. And then in the middle, there are various ways of training. So there are some people who are holistic, but they're simply coaches. They've only had, maybe a year of training, and they need more experience. So I think that what would be really wonderful is to have smaller collective, where the expertise starts. So a Chinese medicine person or an Ayurvedic doctor come in and say, this is the whole of the person. This is the whole of the arc of the individual, right? And the person in the middle, in that holistic space, is there to help the individual to, I don't like this word, but it's be accountable, or to hold their hand a little bit more. They're doing kind of like a nurse type situation where they're going back and forth, right? So that's where they're, and they're almost a go between the two various perspectives on the whole body versus the productive piece. And then the physicians are there as well. So we can constantly go back and forth, because one of the things that I'm always looking at is when someone goes in for a procedure or whatever it is, then all of a sudden they're left to go home without any holding, other than come back make sure that what we did was effective and we're not getting any more symptoms. So their food, their lifestyles, none of these are managed, and the spiritual, emotional perspective, the every single tissue that has been affected by that procedure not being dealt. So that would be my ideal, is to see those things. I don't want to learn about any particular disease system. I'm always shifting that into, how do I call this an idea so that I change the language, so that I change the perspective.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. I think we are trying to come closer without either of us trying to be experts in each other's area. But I think we respect them more than they respect us at this stage. Although there are a lot of aggressive clinicians that I know who are very open. But at the moment, it's a little procedural rather than fully whole body.
Yeah. And you give them a little bit of credit. They are in a system which which deals with disease, whereas we're a system that deals with health.
Indeed.
And no matter what you call that other system, they're looking at disease and we're looking at maintaining health. And it's just two different paradigms.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always the squeaky wheel that's going to get the most, right? So the squeaky wheel is when you're not feeling well, and it goes further into a disease that can be fatal, right? So that's what's going to get most. That's the flashy. That's the thing that's going to get most attention. But if it's like an herb that you can grow anywhere, for thousands of years, rather than look at the new thing, new procedure, new test, new what it is.
Yeah, indeed. We might just ask if there are any questions from our people who have joined us, the lovely people. And we'd love to just hear any thoughts, any comments before we sign off.
Well, then, I think it's time to sign off. Really appreciate everyone who has joined us, and appreciate those who are going to be watching it on the recording. You can contact us anytime, any questions.
So Art of Menopausing and Heart of Menopause. And we love to hear from you. I know that you, as much as I, Ginger, always respond to people's comments, thoughts. We really value them. And thank you for joining us again.
Thank you. Take care.